Mad Max 2 gives you depraved biker gangs, character motivations you can understand, a Pursuit Special 1976 Ford Falcon, a goddamn gyrocopter, and clear stakes and goals you can get behind. In Mad Max 3, you've got a magical monkey, the lost children of Never Never Land, an arena where people flail around like children in a bounce house, Master, Blaster, and Timmy Turner. Mad Max 3 Beyond Thunderdome is the third movie directed by George Miller in a trilogy of dystopian action movies. Later, I'll explain what makes Mad Max 2 The Road Warrior a nearly perfect masterpiece, while Beyond Thunderdome isn't just a bad movie, it's also a complete mindfuck of trying to figure out what the writers were thinking. It's such an unintentionally jumbled mess it makes movies like Eraserhead look like fucking Indiana Jones in terms of understanding what it was meant to be. It's also a huge missed opportunity because seeing an older, more well-adjusted Max could have been room for a great story. The problems with this movie mostly stem from the fact that the script clearly wasn't written with the intention of being a Mad Max film, but was later remarketed to be one, because money. That was the most damaging part about it. It could have just been a really bad post-apocalyptic film, and that would have been fine. Plenty of those exist. But I was tricked into watching it. Even years after they've already made all their money conning people out of tickets, I was conned out of nearly 2 hours of my life. Every facet of this movie has problems, accumulating to one big post-apocalyptic gem dug out of a septic tank. The fact that George Miller let this happen and picked up an obviously bizarre script just to sell a product gives me little hope for Fury Road, the next upcoming Mad Max film. I understand Miller had a personal crisis in his life during filming, but is that really an excuse for misleading your fans and tricking audiences into watching an hour and 47 minutes of bullshit? But we'll get into that later. First, I want to talk about what was so right in Mad Max 2 before we dissect what made Mad Max 3 so wrong. Mad Max 2 is a movie that's all in the execution and less about the substance. The story is really simple and easily summarized in a few sentences. A man named Max wanders into a camp because he's told he can find fuel there. He quickly realizes he's trapped in the camp because a gang of savages is surrounding the camp trying to steal the same fuel he came to get. Finally, Max is forced into a position where his only choice to get anything out of this is to drive a rig for the occupants of the camp with the fuel tanker attached and take it to a safer place. That's it. While the story is consistent and fun, it's not what makes this movie great. The setting, the characters, the visual designs, and the action are so well done you can't help but be invested in the admittedly thin story. In this regard, it strongly reminds me of A Fistful of Dollars. Max draws a lot of parallels to Clint Eastwood's character, the man with no name. In both movies, a lone stranger with a personal code of ethics wanders into a town, or in the case of Mad Max, a small camp in the desert, looking for something to sustain their nomadic lifestyle, but end up getting wrapped up in the problems of the locals and find themselves in a greater plot than themselves. Like Clint Eastwood's character, Max's personal opinions are irrelevant to the plot. So much so that his character only has 16 lines of dialogue in the whole movie.
It's been a pleasure doing business with you, but I'm leaving.
In a way, he's the deus ex machina of someone else's conflict. He's only a small piece of somebody else's story, but the story is told through his eyes, which is a technique I find immersive in film. Instead of trying to get the viewer to fit right in with the setting that's existed long before you watching things unfold, it feels like you yourself have wandered into this mess, just as Max. In a modern action film, you would never see the character of the movie's title have less lines than the antagonist. That's a ballsy move that would only be made by somebody trying to create a piece of art, not somebody trying to push a product with a generic action hero giving out cheesy one-liners. Mad Max 2 also accomplishes something that most modern films fail at miserably, and that's giving exposition of the setting without being dull or instantly breaking my suspension of disbelief. Instead of scrolling text telling me where I am, or characters talking to each other like robots in a horrible attempt at subtly talking to the audience, George Miller lets what's on screen speak for itself. This is another way that Mad Max reminds me of the Dollars movie. Just like the masterfully executed intro scene to Fistful of Dollars, Mad Max 2 pulls this off just as successfully. The movie opens with Max being chased by a small group of bikers with a pretty bonkers fashion style, wearing all leather that reveals random parts of their body, hockey pads with feathers coming out of the shoulders, and hair done like they're in a glam metal band. During the chase, Max maneuvers perfectly around a car wreck that's still smoking, while his pursuers are barely able to do the same. Max eventually pulls off a stunt that gets one of the gang members to shoot another with what appears to be a makeshift crossbow. For a moment, Max thinks he's lost them completely, and pulls over at another freshly made car wreck, the vehicle being a large rig for hauling other cars, with "The vermin have inherited the earth" spray painted on the side. The rig is leaking fuel, and he as quickly as possible finds whatever he can to catch what's leaking out. While he's doing this, one of the bikers drives over the hill and stares at him, but even still, Max continues to worry about capturing the fuel. The biker just stops and stares at Max from a distance while pulling the arrow lodged in his arm out. When they drive off, Max looks around the scene of the car wreck just a little longer to see what he can find, and he picks up a tiny music box. He turns the wind-up key, listens to the theme "Happy Birthday to You" play, and appears amused. Max puts the music box away in his jacket, gets in his car, and drives off, ending the scene. So what did we learn about the setting from this inviting action sequence? First, we're shown that these desert roads aren't safe and are patrolled by eccentric people. We know this not only because he's being chased by them, but it's also shown by the chase leading him past cars that gangs already ran off the road and pillaged. Next, we see that he's an excellent driver, by his ability to avoid obstacles that his pursuers, who look very road savvy, cannot, and moments later by using his brakes to trick them into hurting each other. The last thing we learn is peppered with hints throughout the entire sequence, and what that is the nature of the dystopian setting that we're in. The first hint to this comes from the bikers. Besides their outrageous clothes and hair, they're using makeshift crossbows, not any real weapons, but things they look like they scavenged. Then is the rig that's leaking gasoline. Max shows how desperate he is to get gasoline by risking staying in a dangerous area just to catch some extra gas in a hard hat. Any fuel is clearly precious in this world. The rig also has the phrase spray painted on the side, most likely written by the biker gang, and it's pretty self-explanatory what it means. The last hint comes from how amused Max is by a simple tune that we've all heard 1,000 times. Even after being in an extremely tense and life-threatening situation, he can't help but smile at the stupid music box. This shows that something as common as music is now rare in his world. Now we have a good understanding of the nature of the setting we've just entered. We know the world is clearly a deteriorated version of ours, we know Max is an exceptionally good driver, and we know the main threat of the wasteland. All this exposition established for us in just a 5-minute action sequence that has 0 lines of dialogue. That's George Miller understanding the medium he's using and taking maximum advantage of it. If I wanted to read a wall of text for exposition, I'd read a book. And if I wanted to hear people tell me exposition, I'd listen to a radio play. But here Miller is utilizing the art of film exactly how it should be used. Show me, don't tell me. I used the first 5 minutes of the film as an example, but this technique of showing and not telling is consistent throughout the film, even with little details such as the scarcity of guns in the future. In the first 30 minutes of the movie, the only place you've seen a gun is holstered on Max's leg. The first time Max encounters one of the gang members, not including the opening scene, he comes up behind him unsuspectingly in the desert. This would have been a perfect moment for action movie schlock in a story that doesn't care about continuity or consistency. In any other dumb action movie, this scene would have been used for Max to finally unholster his badass sawed-off shotgun and blow the guy into a B-movie ragdoll. But instead, Max uses a pair of clippers to knock him over the head, which further illustrates the idea that all resources are extremely valuable, even bullets. The only other time you see a gun used is by the main antagonist and leader of the gang, Humongous, once again showing that only the most well-adjusted to the wasteland have found legitimate weapons and are strong enough to keep them. Another quality that attributes to the movie's authentic feeling is the set and costume design. They all look like real possible outfits, vehicles, and camps made by scavengers. I don't want to spoil Mad Max 2 if you've never seen it, but it ends with a really satisfying car chase that's full of practical effects, car wrecks, explosions, and stunts that look extremely real. Oh wait, they were real. They blew up a set that cost nearly $100,000 and filmed it from a dozen different angles to make sure they got it right on their only try. That's the kind of dedication you don't see today. The ending car chase sequence isn't just good, it's one of the best and most exciting I've seen in a movie, without ever entering the territory of schlock. And the perfect conclusion of the chase ends the story with a nice surprise that further drives home the idea that this isn't Max's story. But you know what else isn't Max's story? Mad Max 3.